Yes, but yeah, yes.
Okay, and so the second holds. Okay, all right. Now, if we could please have a roll call vote to accept the additions and corrections to this evening's agenda.
Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Hughley,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Chair Anderson, Chair Adams,
Aye.
the motion carries.
Thank you very much. It's really been interesting. Okay. And now we will go to oral communication. If there is anyone who wishes to make comments on anything that is not on today's agenda, this is the time to do so. And I would allow for 3 minutes to anyone who wishes to make, any member of the public who wishes to make any comments on anything not on today's agenda. Is there any member of the public who wishes to make comment?
Yes, we have one raised hand.
Okay.
The number in 902, I've asked you to unmute and you may identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. This is Nina Beatty. Last month on the 23rd, I wrote to CalAm and requested a list of all the chemicals, microbes, and other substances that they test for in drinking water for the Monterey District, specifically for Monterey Peninsula customers. I wrote to Evan Jacobs and copied Jonathan Lear. Evan Jacobs immediately responded back the next day and sent me the link to the annual report from last year and said that the 2022 report would be soon. And he also said that Dr. Wang was in charge of water quality for CalAm, that he would be able to provide me with a complete list of, he said, primary and secondary drinking water standards and more detail on our testing protocols. I'm still waiting for that list. And that's been almost 4 weeks. So on Friday, I sent another note to Dr. Wang and I said to remind him, would you please send me a list of everything that you're testing for in the drinking water. So I'm hoping that this will be something quick that he responds to. And I would like to request that a list of substances be posted on MPWMD's website as well as CalAm, so it's easy for the public to see what the water company is testing for in our drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to make comment?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. With that, we will close oral communications and move forward with our consent calendar. Is there any member of the board who wishes to pull anything on our consent calendar for either discussion or questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Item number 8, please.
Okay. Is there any other member of the board who wishes to pull any item for discussion from consent calendar? Okay. Is there any member of the public who wishes to pull anything from the consent calendar?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go back to Mr. Edwards for comments on item number 8.
I just want to thank the office of the DA, District Attorney, for looking at that complaint and answering that complaint in a very timely manner that we got it back on our agenda tonight. She answered the complaint well. She looked at the tapes. We were found not to have done anything wrong, but to make everybody happy and keep transparency there, we'll redo it. But I appreciate the office of the District Attorney on the speediness. You know, if we can get our judges to work that fast, I'd be even more happy. That's all I had on that one.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Yes, Mr. Oglesby.
I had the same thoughts, but I want to thank our general counsel, district counsel for making sure that there was nothing there for the DA to grab hold to. And I did like the way all 3 lawyers positioned themselves. I like the questions from the CalAm lawyer, and I like the way the DA answered them. But we were in that position because our district counsel put us in that position underneath the leadership of the chair. So thank you.
I agree with you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. So we have no other comments or questions on the consent calendar. I would like to have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move to approve it.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, the motion was made by Director Edwards, seconded by Paul. Roll call vote. Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Riley, Director Paul,
Yes.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close consent calendar and move into our general manager's report. So, Mr. General Manager, I'm looking at you.
You got it. We'll just wait for the slides to come up. I do have the standard monthly regulatory reporting and then a few other items to touch on. Good. So I've got control. This is the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System report, which is just the two regulated large sources of water. What you can see is the Carmel River target greatly exceeds the actual, and I just want to explain why. So again, we do the quarterly water budget. Actually start with an annual water budget in October, or approved in September for October, and then quarterly, and you see these budgets. What happened in the year to date is we've had rains. So a lot of Carmel River pumping has been recategorized as Table 13 water rights. We've had floods that took out some wells for that period of time when the river was really high, so less pumping could be actually occur. Then most recently, the Pierce well, which is really the largest of the lower Carmel Valley wells, was out, reducing pumping off the river. And then we've been prioritizing pumping from the river for injection in ASR instead of for production for customer use. And so you'll see on the next slide, had a little more pure water Monterey use than budgeted, and then less Carmel River. But that big difference doesn't signal anything that we're worried about at this time. I guess I was only good for one slide. There we go. On the other water projects and rights, this is where you can see that Pure Water Monterey is producing more than was budgeted. And that's because we've discovered that we can do more production for use in the Cal-Am service territory in the winter because the growers aren't competing for some of the recycled water up at the plant. So we've been running the plant, Monterey One Water has been running the plant at some of the highest capacities that it's ever performed in 2+ years. So that's a positive. On the Table 13 side, I've already mentioned that, you know, we budgeted 0, assuming it might be a dry year again. It's a wet year, so we get to, you know, under a different water right, Cal-Am can call some of that Carmel River pumping to be under this right. And then Sand City, we did see 15 acre feet in March. So that's a positive as well. On production for customer service, which again is a measure of demand, you know, I'd like to say that the rains have reduced irrigation, but it's really been spotty across all the months. In the first 3 months of the year, October, November, December, this year was less than last year in usage. But then along came January and we were higher. And then in February, we were significantly lower, even though last February was dry and there was more irrigation. So it's hard to say that what we're seeing is all due to the rain and usage patterns. But as you look at water year 2022 in the lower right-hand corner, you can see that year to date, we are 60 acre feet better than last year. So I'd like to say that demand is probably pretty flat. There's less irrigation in the springtime because of the rains. On rainfall, the blue is the current year, the red is the long-term average. We're at about 34.5 inches through April 1st, and that's 168% of long-term average. And I'll show you a couple of other things here. This is the blue being daily and red being cumulative, and the red axis is on the right-hand side. That's the total that I just mentioned, the 34.5 roughly inches to date. What's interesting is that places us right now, comparing to full years, as the fourth wettest year on record. That's about 120 plus years worth of data. The record was 1998 at 46. So, we would have a long way to go to break the record. The third place was 1969 at 36.8. So that's still within our sights, something to think about. However, in April in 98, we got 4.1 inches, same in 1983, and 2.1 in 1969. And you can see April, which is the blue bars to date, very, very little. So it's unlikely, unless we get, pretty huge rain event next week, which isn't in the forecast, that will, break those records. And then finally, 98, which was the wettest rainfall total, they had 2.5 inches in May, whereas every other year had negligible amounts. So it would take a couple of, big weeks here to finish April, and then a wet May to really move the needle, if you will. But you can see where we stand. The orange dotted line is year to date, and we are solidly within the extremely wet category. What that means is 87.5% of all years are drier than the extremely wet years. So we're in that 12.5% exemplary category in wetness. And frankly, if the year ended today, we're well within the extremely wet. On stream flow, you can see that January and March exceeded the long-term averages. And you'll continue to see, I think, stream flow will exceed the long-term averages for the next couple of months because it's so saturated out there. And then finally, aquifer storage and recovery. This summary, the orange bars are the daily totals, and their daily injection is the right-hand axis. And the blue line is the cumulative. As of yesterday, we were at 1,065 acre feet, which is pretty good. But you can see those white gaps. The line right at about between the 12 and the 14 on the right-hand side, that would be a really good day. So if the yellow bar reached that 13, little over 13 acre feet per day, that's what we were shooting for. And the first kind of white shortfall at the end of February and early March was when they were testing the new pump stations. There were some leaks detected, and in order to keep tank levels secure for fire flow and safety, we backed off the pumping for injection. And then most recently, you can see basically the first couple of weeks of April, we had backed off quite a bit, and that was due to the Pierce well being out of service, and so not enough capacity to pump to serve both customers and injection for ASR. So it's not the best we could have done by any means, but we are back at 3,000 gallons per day as of roughly yesterday, which will get us that 13 acre feet per day. So we've got probably another 30 days of injection without rain. And if we get some more rain, we should be in pretty good shape. So that concludes this report. I do have a couple of other things I want to highlight for you. On Pure Water Monterey, I think most of you know that the water purchase agreement was signed between Monterey One Water, ourselves, and California American. And we are moving forward with construction bid packages will be advertised as of today. And we expect award at Monterey One Water's board meeting July 31st. And then following the award, we'll see some dirt turned over, and we'll know that we're building the project, and we'll begin focusing on what that means regulatorily. Our focus right now is securing the $42 million of grant monies that we've secured. I did let the aide in Congressman Panetta's office know that we did sign the water purchase agreement. They were of concern that some of the federal monies would be of risk, and so they're happy for everyone here on the peninsula that water purchase agreement is signed. We will be finalizing, signing, and then executing the agreements for all these grants, hopefully in the next couple of months. We've been in communication with our grant people for the 4.8 million through the governor's budget and the 11.94 through the Department of Water Resources. And we look pretty good. We've signed one agreement, the DWR agreement, and we're still waiting on final agreement with the State Water Board for the 4.8. So our piece of this is moving along, as is Monterey One Waters. And then finally, the expansion should be complete during 2025, probably third quarter, maybe fourth quarter, depending on construction issues. But we're targeting the end of 2025. So that's moving pretty well. I also wanted to touch base on a couple of guest opinions, editorials, a couple of issues that have been raised, some emails that have been sent to you as a board with respect to Measure J, just a couple of issues. Somehow, there are certain parties out there who are contending that somehow the district is moving too fast and that Measure J was just to explore the feasibility of acquiring Cal-Am. And I want to remind you that the actual language of the initiative, the initiative was titled the Monterey Peninsula Water System Local Ownership and Cost Savings Initiative, Section 2, Purpose, requiring the district to take affirmative action to the extent financially feasible to acquire the water system assets owned and operated by the California American Water Company that currently provide water service to the district and its ratepayers. That's kind of the preamble to the actual ordinance. And then in the ordinance language, which is Section 4, the district shall acquire through negotiation or through eminent domain, if necessary, all assets of California American Water or any successor, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the ordinance. That's the making of law put on us that we can't undo without another vote of the people. So that is the direction we were given by the voters. The second thing we're hearing a little bit about, somehow the cost of failure is 30+ million. And the district hasn't disclosed this risk to the public and other fictions that are out there. So I'm reminded that at several points we had PowerPoint presentations as to what the exposure would be. But even during the January 5th LAFCO meeting, Commissioner Oglesby, in his role as a mayoral rep, actually asked the question. So I'm trying to figure out exactly where the 34 million potential court case fees from, the staff is saying, where does that come from? And LAFCO staff said, well, it's included in consultant Richard Berkson's report that he provided October 11th. So I went back in there and took a look, and he also said MPWMD indicated that it was using a pay-as-you-go approach to financing its eminent domain costs, which means by the end of the initial phase right to take trial, it will already have paid its own costs, including pre-trial and litigation expenses. In case of an initial phase loss, MPWMD would then still need to fund Cal-Am's litigation expenses that could presumably range from 7.6 million to 12 million based on prior examples. So LAFCO's own consultant pegged that number at that 7.6 to 12. But going on just a little bit, Cal-Am posed a number of 10 million total for both parties, us and Cal-Am, in the proposed right to take bench trial in a letter in April of 2021. And the district's own eminent domain attorneys who've worked on these before, they did Felton, they did the Golden State Water takeover in Ojai. They pegged it at combined at 15 to 20 million. But again, we pay as you go, so it would only be a portion of that, which would be Cal-Am's costs. So, I think it's important to know the district's never wavered in its statements about the potential financial risks. And we've been very upfront, and it's probably been in 4 or 5 different PowerPoint presentations publicly. I think many of the proponents of this who put Measure J on the ballot and gave it to us to execute know what these risks are. And so we're not shirking our obligation to tell folks about that. And contrary to what we've been hearing, we do have reserves to cover it. If it gets much higher, or we go much further and it grows, well, we'll have to look at that when we get there. But right now, it's not perceived to be an insurmountable risk that would bankrupt the district or our ability to execute our functions. And then finally, we heard from a couple of speakers at our public forum, well, you should update your feasibility. And there's some pluses and there's a lot of minuses to that. If government always updated its studies, you'd spend all your time updating your studies and never executing on them. But the 60,000 that you just authorized or reauthorized in the consent item is in fact for a rate study based on the current projected appraised value of re-examining if it's financially feasible. Will rates be less by a lot, by a little, or the same, or exceed? And you know, our test for financial feasibility is that there would be savings to the ratepayer. So that's what that purpose is, so that you will have a chance to know where we stand when you make your next set of decisions. So I think everything you're reading or receiving in your inboxes is a little bit either folks who haven't been following it for 4 years or folks who just want to instill a little bit of concern in all of you and the constituents over our ability to get this thing done. So with that, I think we can move on to the report from District Council. Thanks, Madam
Thank you
Chair.
very much. Thank you for that good report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Before I get to my report, I'd like to introduce to you a member from my office, Michael Laredo. And many of you know him, but he has been practicing law out of our office since 2017. You're going to see him from time to time because I want him to become more well-versed in water issues. The one question that has always arisen when we have more than one attorney attending, and I assure you that we are not double billing, and that unless there is a specific focused reason for him to be here on something, that there will not be a separate bill for his attendance. But thank you for this opportunity. Now, actually turning to my report, I'm reporting on agenda item CS2 from the March 20th meeting. What is CS2? That was a conference with legal counsel concerning the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association lawsuit against the Water Management District. We characterize that as MPTA, for Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association 2, because there are a multiple number of litigations brought by MPTA. Earlier this evening, you actually approved the minutes of that meeting, and I'm going to read to you what those minutes are as my report out of that session. And on page 10 of your board packet, it states that the following action was taken in closed session on CS2 on Monday, March 20th, special and regular board meeting. A motion was offered by Director George Riley with a second by Director Karen Paul. The board authorized staff, general counsel, and special district counsel Michael Colantuno to prosecute an appeal of the March 3, 2023 order and judgment in MPTA tendered by Judge Carrie Panetta. The motion was adopted by a roll call vote of 6 ayes. Those in favor were Edwards, Riley, Paul, Anderson, Adams, and Oglesby. 0 noes, 1 director, Director Eisenhart, was absent. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, District Counsel. We'll move forward and go to our director's reports, including AB 1234 reports on trips, conference attendance, and other meetings. Does anyone have anything they wish to bring forward? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. I attended Seaside City Council meeting the first week of April, give a report on our April 3rd meeting. I also listened to the Monterey One Recycle Water committee. In that stated what the general manager stated, they're going to put some bids out coming up. Other issues that they worried about is some of the grants still need work to be done on them, like and the easements and for the wells and stuff. And those grants can't have to be completed with all that information in it. So Monterey One is working on negotiating with the cities on that issue. They asked if we could help if we can, but I think we just need to find out, GM, for our May 1st water supply meeting, how many of the grants are really done and what work is needed to finish up that we can get, so we can all know in the public, because it seemed like once we got Cal-Am off on their way, something else comes up. And the grants can't get released until all the work is done. So we need to work on that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions at this point? Okay, seeing none, we will accept item number 11 and go into our first action item of the evening, which is item number 12, and it will be to consider adoption of the district's strategic goals and objectives for 2023.
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder to the public that our board had a strategic planning session on March 31st. It was 4 meetings on 4 separate topics in a 2-week period. So our board's been very, very busy. But this strategic planning session, I thought really took off. There was great conversation. The board led most of everything that you see on paper through their discussion. And when I refer to paper, I'm not referring to a page number, but Joelle, if you could bring up Exhibit 12A. And while it's coming up, I want to encourage the public, beginning tomorrow, hopefully we'll have the new, if you adopt them, have the new strategic goals and objectives posted to our website. The public is encouraged to go read and examine them. There's a lot of work to be done. I'm not going to go through all the objectives, but I do want to touch on just identifying what all of the goal areas are. So here we go. Goal number 1 is to secure a safe, reliable, sustainable, diversified, affordable, legal water supply for the Monterey Peninsula through support and investment in Pure Water Monterey expansion, which thankfully we have signed the water purchase agreement. Yes, so these are near-term goals, 1 to 2 year timeline. The second goal is to expedite and implement public ownership of the water distribution system as directed by the voters pursuant to Measure J. Goal number 3, near-term goal number 3, is to protect and enhance the district's financial resources, both short-term and long-term. Goal number 4 is increase public awareness and engagement and ensure MPWMD reputation for excellence, competence, integrity, and commitment to the community's best interests remains intact. Goal number 5, near-term goal number 5, continue strategic planning for near-term water supply, including operation optimization, which was a very interesting discussion about how do you protect the things you have and how do you make them work better? And it goes a little bit to that conversation over ASR that we just looked at. But it also goes to Sand City desal wells and so forth. And near-term goal number 6, focus on organizational effectiveness and planning for the future, which is what do you do when Dave Laredo's 80 and Dave Stoltz 73 and And then we have a few longer term goals. Goal number 7, longer term, is continue strategic planning for long-term water supply. Water supply planning will see the summary of the Los Padres Dam study, which is a long time coming. That's an issue that's going to have to get dealt with, and some other things. Seaside basin issues that we need to talk about. Goal area number 8, focus on clarity and customer-friendly process for permits, rules, and regulations. We continue to try to make our arcane rules and regs and ordinances somewhat customer-friendly. That's not always easy. And goal number 9, look at a new direction for the Carmel River Mitigation Program requirements. Obviously, Cal-Am is doing all they can to remain inside their legal right. Actually, Director Riley and I talked about this earlier. The non-Cal-Am pumpers will now have as big or a bigger influence on the river than Cal-Am at this point. So we're going to have to reassess what the mitigation program should look like, what it should cost in the future, how much time do we need to monitor the river and make decisions about where it's going in the future. So that's it. 9 proposed goals with many supporting objectives, which are the roadmap for getting them done. Unfacilitated, I thought we did a great job as a team, and it was attended by several members of the public. I think we maxed out at 5 at one point and kind of carried 2 people through most of the process. So it was a good day. So, any questions? Yeah, it's a great question. When Order 9510 came down, it was recognized that Cal-Am was, clearly pumping. Well, about 60% of their pumping at the time was not legally authorized, but it was also about 3 times more to 4 times more than the non-Cal-Am pumpers. And so in the early 90s, kind of around that same time, when we looked at what we call the allocation EIR, we allocated water to all the jurisdictions, actually preceding Order 9510. We looked at several different pumping scenarios, and all of them ultimately were, they all had environmental effects that needed mitigation. So there was no like, oh, if you pump at this level, it's fine, no environmental impacts. And so we developed the mitigation program. We had a 5-year program, subject to renewal. It was renewed, and then it became part of the budget process. And all of the state's orientation and the 4 kind of public interest lawsuits or notifications to the state about environmental degradation were all about Cal-Am. Well, Cal-Am is now down to their legal limit, about 3,376 acre feet per year. We've seen an uptick in the non-Cal-Am pumpers as vineyards have gone in and different things have occurred in development. And so we are going to have to, as a group, staff-wise, look at those and say, all right, if the river continues to dry up in drier than normal years, then we have concerns. And the folks causing it are going to be, 60% non-Cal-Am pumpers and 40% Cal-Am pumpers. But what was learned all along the way in those, 30 plus years is it's a heck of a lot easier to get meaningful impacts when you go after the one big pumper. Trying to establish new regulations or mitigations for 1,000 individual pumpers, is going to be challenging. The old herding cats kind of thing, but also it'll be very unpopular. And so the Carmel Valley director and the supervisor, you'll hear most of it, but all of you will hear all of it, and so I don't think we want to head into it saying, oh, we need to come up with a set of enforcements. It's going to take a monitoring period to see what the impacts on the environment are of multiple years of reduced pumping by CalAm. And then if there are harms, then it'll be trying to define a program that you can mitigate for. But we have no intention of saying, okay, now it's on to the next group of pumpers. Because I don't think, when you really look at it, there's a difference. Most of the Carmel Valley pumpers are upland wells, but it's those who are on the alluvium, really pumping from the river, which flows underground in a known indefinite channel. Those are the ones that we'll have to look at for any changes to the mitigation program.
So I think some of us probably have questions, and I know I do, and I want to ask you this. I'm very concerned that if we just let them go, that it's going to be not dissimilar to what we're facing in the county with the short-term rental program. And it's very difficult to put the horse back in the barn, so to speak. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could do, if we have thought about doing some sort of a voluntary limitation program that offers some sort of incentive. And I don't even know what that incentive would be at this point, but so that people would be conscious and start already doing their own kind of, just keeping track and being conscious. And I don't want to say policing themselves, because it's not quite like that, but self regulation.
Well, we
And
do have.
Madam Chair, I just want to point out that this agenda item is identifying this as a strategic goal.
Right. So
You're
we should
now
come
taking a
back.
deeper dive into saying, what could those goals be? The goal is to look at the new direction for the mitigation program. This topic, fascinating as it is not really tonight on the agenda, but you're teeing it up for a future discussion.
Thank you very much for reeling me back in. Does anyone else have something that's clearly not off the panel, off the charts as I was, to make comments? Yes.
Strategic planning went really well. With Dave facilitating, we didn't have an outside facilitator, and I'm very impressed with how we work together. And I'm happy with the goals that we came up with.
I was pleased that everybody really was engaged. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone was sitting around, on their phone or anything. I feel like everybody was really engaged.
Well,
with what it
I'll
was.
be honest with you. You guys parse some words, which, words have meaning, and you usually hear that from the attorneys in the room. But, there's like, no, what I mean, somebody would say, no, what I meant was this when I wrote that one, and what you're saying is this, and I think they're two different things. And so it engaged you to kind of sort of, well, what do we mean? What's it going to be? So that was good.
I remember somewhere around noontime or whatever, we were in the middle or 2/3 of the way through. I remember suggesting that maybe we're done here. Almost to, unanimous opposition to that idea.
It's great.
Yeah. I actually thought some of the best conversation came right after lunch. So
That really was very good, very interesting. And we were sort of a working lunch.
now I don't see Director Eisenhardt's hand up, but I do want to add something that he's raised through one of my division managers, which is something we didn't talk at length about, but it's smart metering and better information. And I don't know if Director Eisenhardt, you want to say anything, but I think we're going to make it a priority of the Water Demand Committee to better understand what's happening with AMR, because they were supposed to roll out, and CalAm was supposed to roll out a whole program under the last rate case for advanced metering infrastructure. And in the current rate case, it seems to now say that, no, we'll just replace meters on the regular schedule, but they'll use cellular linkages. We've promoted a couple of programs that you can do flow meters in your own home, but this idea of information technology and giving the consumer greater real-time information is something we need to get a little smarter about what's really happening, because I think that there's a potential for it to go too slow or not have enough real-time metering information. And so it's not in here. We didn't discuss it during the strategic planning process. But afterwards, when Director Eisenhardt brought it up, I'm like, well, that is kind of a big item that we need to look more carefully at.
Yeah, I don't mind commenting. Um,
Go
you can
ahead,
hear me?
Mark.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. So before I comment on that, and thank you, Dave, for bringing that up, I just actually want to highlight one of the goals because I don't want the public or anybody to think that this isn't important. And I know it is for everybody. It certainly is for me. It's goal number 4. And that's the one that says increase public awareness, engagement, and ensure the district's reputation for excellence, et cetera. And if you look at some of those objectives, while it's not, I think, carved out expressly, but it's also what we do when we talk about the steelhead fishery program and when we talk about land management around the Carmel Valley. I mean, all of those things are important also, especially now what we've seen after all of the rain and frankly, even destruction and what the district is doing. And I really want to highlight that. I don't want anybody in the public to think that that's not an ongoing goal. And there are members of the staff of the district, many, who do so much in this area. And I just really wanted to do a shout out there and let them know and the public know that I think that's very much a part of our overall and continuous goals and objectives. Going back to smart metering. So and I don't know, maybe Director Edwards might get a chuckle, but I have been saying recently that this is a burr of my whatever. I'm really focused on this, and I want to say this as we've discussed in the water demand meetings. I don't know if the technology is there yet. I want us to investigate it. We've had some preliminary sort of banter over this, but yes, because of the tiered rate increases that we have, and they're not gradual. If every ratepayer had an app on his or her phone, right, that gives them a warning that you're about to go from tier 2, kind of painful, to tier 3, sell some real estate so you can pay your bill, that would be great. That would be great. And I think that is probably could be a very powerful and effective tool in curbing, demand. That we have this real-time awareness with an app on our cell phones, right? Which is sort of a step above, you take it not just from the meter, but to your phone, right? If we could get that, and I just think, I always say, if you can send a man to the moon, we could do fill in the blank, and this is the blank. I think we need to do that. And I'm going to be hopefully not terribly annoying, but I'm going to stay on this. It's a big deal for me.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Yes, I'd just like to say, if we're going to carry this discussion further, it seems to me the first step would be for us to know what CalAM is doing in terms of AMR. So first step, I would suggest that staff prepare, brief the board at a future time on what has CalAM done so far with AMR, and what is it planning to do in the near future?
Yeah, we'll keep it at the Water Demand Committee level because I think it'll be a couple of reports. I'm very interested to see how their trial went. For several years they've had, you could opt into a program where there'd be greater data accessibility, but I don't know how deep it got. So it's something that we're going to try to get smarter at. And I notice, Chris Cook is on, so he and I will have a discussion, or it'll be part of his staff and our staff. But yeah, we do want to find out what the capabilities are.
Thank you. Yes, Supervisor Anderson. Director Anderson. That's your turn, Don. Okay.
I think it's a great idea, at some point, depending upon where we go with Measure J, we are going to could be the organization that is delivering the water. And I know that a lot of people don't, right now, if they find that there's a huge amount of water use that they weren't aware of, they don't necessarily believe CalAm when they tell them, well, you used whatever, however many gallons more than you're supposed to be using, than you used to use. So it would be a good idea for another good idea, another reason for us to get on top of it, because then people can be in charge of their own use.
Yeah.
And know what they're doing, and know when they have, besides getting into tier 2, know when have a leak and there's something underground that's broken, or a rat chewed on it or whatever. I know we've all had those kinds of things happen. So I think it's a good idea. And if I may, just one more comment about the session that we had at Asilomar. The other thing I really liked about it is that we were all talking to each other rather than just having a question from the facilitator and talking to the facilitator. It really allowed us to just hear each other and talk to each other. And that was wonderful for me. That was really great. Got to know people and hear how they think, and do some group work.
Yes.
I just want to know how we're gonna budget this coming up. If we gonna, not talking about it tonight, but each committee ought to get that budget and see how we're gonna do on it. It looked like we got 2 years to do some of this stuff. I don't know how long allocation EIR would take, but I like to get one done and get it done correctly, that we're not being tried in court on it. So we need to get moving and take our time and make sure we can plan it out. So I know next month is budget month, so we can start budgeting, and all know have to be in that budget right there. It's 2 years running. We got to cut back a little bit on some of this stuff. So, thank you.
I very much appreciate that. I just want you to know that there's been some discussion over here about not needing an EIR for the allocation process. So there's going to be some
I like to see us
discussion.
we got people out there that's looking at us, and if we don't do one, I think we're gonna be in court or something. So I hope it's good, because it's been, 10, 15 years before one was done. So let's keep up with the times.
Good comments. Anyone else? Is there any member of the public out there who wishes to comment on this item?
Hi, were you talking to me? I couldn't hear you. This is Susan Schiavone. I just briefly looked at the goals and objectives. I haven't had a chance to look at them deeply, but just what you've shared, I think is wonderful. I commend all of you for working together so well. I think having no facilitator did actually help you guys communicate clearly to each other, and you have gelled as a board wonderfully. And I'm very happy to see these goals. And I was especially interested in number 5, talking about climate change, because we are in the midst of it and we need to learn resilience and how to face that in the future. And I just want to thank all of you. I think you did a great job, and I hope you can pull all this off. And I support you 100%. Thank you.
And next speaker.
Adams, I see no raised hands, so I return it back to the board.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So as I bring it back to the board, we are to consider adoption of the district's strategic goals and objectives. So I believe that it would be appropriate for us to have a motion and a second to move forward with this. Thank you. Is there? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If we could please have a roll call vote.
Yes, so the motion was made by Director Paw, second by Director Anderson. Roll call vote, Director Riley. Director Edwards.
Aye.
Director Eisenhart.
Aye.
Director Paw.
Yes.
Director Oglesby.
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson. Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks. This is a very exciting step forward. I too just share the pride that I think all of us sort of feel in ourselves. It was really well done. And thank you, Dave. You did a super job as leading
Yes.
us. You did. I think you had a whole lot to do with why it was an easy discussion for us. And Joel, absolutely. He's our,
That's right.
It's a-
We've declared easels and pens officially dead.
Yes.
No whiteboard.
well, thank you again. I think it was really a day well spent with that question. Thank you so much. Okay, and now we will close item number 12 and move into item 13, which is a discussion item that we have on the report on the rescission of stage 2 water conservation in response to executive order.
I'm pleased to report that this is our last item, but I'm disappointed to report that you will not set the record for the shortest meeting in my 12 years by about 6 minutes. So. Stephanie Locke, Stephanie, are you going to take this one or?
I
want me
would
to?
be happy to.
Okay.
A very quick staff note for you, or staff report for you. On March 24th of this year, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-523, which rescinded some of the paragraphs that were adopted last year, which directed water suppliers to implement level 2 of their water shortage contingency plans in response to the drought. The district proactively triggered stage 2 of our water conservation plan. And essentially stage 2 doesn't really change anything other than increase the amount of public outreach we have telling people to save water. But stage 2 automatically sunset without further action of the board when the regulatory order was canceled. So all of our water waste restrictions remain in effect. And in our board packet today, we had a list of some of the things such as water must be served only on request in restaurants and food service areas. And there should be notification on the table of that requirement. All leaks, breaks, and other malfunctions in anybody's plumbing must be repaired within 72 hours of notification that there's a leak or acknowledgement that there's a leak. Drinking water used for irrigation or other outdoor purposes must not be allowed to run to waste, and multiple other water waste restrictions. We do have staff that are out and about and driving around and will notify people if they see water waste occurring. We also have a button on our website for people to report water waste when they see it occurring, and the district and CalAm will go out and check and make sure things get fixed. So at this time, we just have now stepped back just a little bit, so we're not going to be as actively promoting saving water, but we always are actively promoting saving water. So there's really no change, but we do have to take the action to step back.
For your report. And let's see if there's any board member that wishes to ask a question or make a comment. Yes, Alvin. Sorry.
That emergency water ordinance that we came up with the city, that has expired, or is it about to expire?
No, it automatically expired when the governor took action directing that that his order no longer applied.
Okay, thank you.
And Stephanie, will you clarify the outdoor seating ordinance? What's its status?
Thank you. So last year and the previous 2 years, the board adopted an urgency ordinance that exempted or basically suspended the district's requirement for permits for outdoor restaurant seating in excess of half of the permitted interior number of seats. Essentially, if a restaurant had a water permit or was legally entitled to have, say, 50 restaurant seats inside, the district does not get involved if they have 25 or less seats outside. But when the pandemic hit in 2020, we suspended that requirement or that rule and allowed them to put as many seats outside as they wanted. But that ordinance expires April 18th. And at that point, we'll go back to the current rule, which is you can have half of the number of outdoor seats as you're allowed to have indoors. And if you have more than that and you don't have a permit for it, then you need a water permit from the district.
What have we done to get the word out to the
Um,
jurisdictions and the
yeah,
restaurants?
Good question. We're actually in the process of notifying the jurisdictions, the Hospitality Association, the Chambers of Commerce, and then we will also be sending out a notice to the restaurants about the change.
And I think we'll take advantage of that communication to remind them that we have gone back from stage 2 to stage 1, but that stage 1 still includes a few of these things you saw in the staff note, like water service only when asked and so forth. So I think, we have two things happening that are independent of each other, but the timing is right on top of each other and they're related now, just because we're going back to the way things were and people kind of forgot, well, how were they? But the outdoor seating by design was hotly discussed whether there's an impact, and we determined there is no impact on water use up to a certain level. But there are those restaurants who got comfortable with it, and so we're going to have to police. So I think it's important to let them know that that's going away, but also that the rules for stage 2 and stage 1 are very similar. And as Stephanie pointed out, it was mostly just public outreach and enforcement that we increase in stage 2. So there were letters sent to folks irrigating. Oh, I can't remember the term. What was the term for turf? Non-essential.
Non-functional.
Yeah. Non-functional. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
We did send letters out. We did have a couple violations. We had a lot of water waste complaints, so that people knew that enforcement was up. But just reminding them that doesn't mean that you can just, run water off your driveway into the street and so forth. People need to be reminded. I think it's, folks here are so much more attuned to the conservation ethic than elsewhere, that it's not that hard of a reminder.
Thank you. George? Oh, sorry. Mark, is your hand up? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Stephanie, would you be willing to also share with the board and the public that on the policing side, in addition to all those things you talked about, at least as an initial sort of response to non-compliance, which hopefully that's not even going to be an issue, we had some discussions about initially moving gently with, for example, restaurants or businesses that are perhaps tenants. Remember, the idea was we don't want to trigger some kind of a non-monetary default with a recalcitrant landlord, because
Exactly. The Water Demand Committee met and talked about this. The concept is that as we transition back into our normal phase, we will be contacting management essentially of any non-compliant outdoor seating restaurant initially, rather than going full force enforcement on it, and giving them an opportunity to come into compliance. Obviously, if they continue not complying, then we will follow up, because ultimately our enforcement efforts are taken against the property owner. But I think our goal is not to come down with a heavy hand on this, but rather to get their cooperation.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
I have just a comment. The one that I see the most often is a lack of the notifications on the table. That they should be asking if you want water, not just putting it there, because I'd say at least 50% of the places I go. And then if those people are also having a beer or something and they're not drinking their water. So that one seems to be very low on the
Yeah.
degree of what's important.
I would greatly appreciate it if you'd let me know if you go to a restaurant and get served water without requesting it, and we will contact them and educate them.
I'd wait till after you get your food though.
No, don't tell them anything. Just let me know.
Once to this place that I go often, and the fellow said, well, I do what my boss tells me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of turnover, and when you're an 18, 19-year-old server, and if you're told one thing you have to do is make sure those glasses of water are full, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I mean, we're not going to name names tonight, but there's one restaurant it's printed on the menu, water served only upon request, and they just serve it. It's right there. And there's others like that. So.
Okay, any other comments from the board on this item? I'll go to the public and see if any member of the public wishes to make any comment on this discussion item.
Yes, just as a reminder, if you're participating by phone, please push *9. And if you would like to make public comment and you're joining us via Zoom, please raise your hand. Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Okay, with that, well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for the report. And with that, it's a discussion item, so we will close the item and just make the comment that is there any member of the public or any member of the board who wishes to address anything on items 14 through 23, which are informational items and staff reports.
I do see raised hand in the public.
Yes, if you could please identify yourself and make your comment.
Melody, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Melody Chrislock. My comment is on, I think it was item 15 and 16. The problem with the disinformation that some of the letters to the editor and op-ed writers, Ron Cheshire and John McPherson, have put out a lot of misinformation. And, the problem with this is that most of the, only less than 200 people attended the Measure J rollout. And most people have no idea what the truth is. So when they get these op-eds, in full circulation, and then Cal-Am went and sent it out to all of their ratepayers, which I can't even figure out how that's legal. But I really feel like it would be to the district's benefit if you could put an op-ed once in a while in the paper, and it's the Pine Cone and the Herald where this misinformation gets distributed, just to set the record straight on the facts, because people don't know the facts. And when you give them misinformation, and then months later I start hearing, oh, well, I thought that this was going to go on our tax bills because somebody puts this in an op-ed. And I just would encourage you to consider, I know Dave doesn't really think it's important right now, but I do. I'm just being the squeaky wheel here. So anyway, I would hope to see some factual op-eds correcting some of this misinformation that's been put out there in the last few weeks. Thank you.
Chris Luck. Any other comments?
Yes, at this time, I would like to invite Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Hi, I just want to piggyback on what Melody Chrislock said. Yes, it would be nice to get some information out of the district to refute some of these untruths that are being told. I did write a response letter to Ron Cheshire's article, so I hope it does get printed in the Herald, and I have sent it over to Joelle tonight to share with you. So thank you all.
Susan, any other comments?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Okay, well, since there are no additional comments from the staff, from the public, and no comments from our board, we will adjourn our meeting at exactly 7:14 p.m.
Go Warriors.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Recording stopped.